glam rock is partly a response to like existential doom.
In the late 1960s, there was a real sense that revolution would happen. Full-scale revolution was imminent, and people were very willing to fight all the way to the death, to have revolution all the way to the death, to see full-scale liberation. And that would not mean that we would just simply shift around some gender norms or shift around some sexualities. These categories would be exploded. And if there were physical fallout in the result of it, so be it.
I would say that there were multiple revolutions, but the two that I think of are the sexual revolution that was a piece of the larger political revolutionary movements that were happening at the time.
The whole notion of smashing monogamy that was coming out of various liberation movements at the time was a main mantra of the Weather Underground, for example, but not unique to them. That many communes, activist groups, and liberation cells were in fact talking about smashing monogamy, the need to break out of monogamous relationships in order to free people in true ways.
Hippie communities were very much about building safe, self-contained spaces in which to experiment with a more playful, loving kind of lifestyle, and so part of that was sexual experimentation.
Smash monogamy involved experimenting with same-sex sexuality for men and for women. But a lot of groups also formed around this idea of same-sex sexuality as thoroughly and completely liberating. And again, it is breaking out of heteronormative behaviors attached to marriage, attached to nuclear family, and some of it is a liberation call to break out of these very confining social norms.
There's a real tension within the sexual revolution about, for me, when I evaluated about which kind of sexual revolution are we talking about, the ability to screw who you want when you want, or are we talking about a sexual revolution where we really look seriously at the interrelationship of gender and sexuality? Gender androgynous presentation and hard rock and roll.
So we can start with the birth of glam rock. So Bowie performs a concert in February of 1970 with a band called The Hype, where he's Rainbow Man and somebody else is Cowboy Man, and they have these personas that they've taken on. And the concert apparently was a huge flop, but that marks the birth of glam rock. And Bowie developed that further with Ziggy and Aladdin Sane, and Mark Boland and T-Rex took it from there also, and Mott the Hoople, and all these other groups kind of exploded glam rock.
I think part of what makes Ziggy Stardust and other glam rocker performances so incredibly powerful is that they're a commentary on the failure of the political movements to create liberation, and so we see a sort of post-political cultural response to these political movements.
Ziggy Stardust in particular is really the first postmodern work of music and rock.
This explosion onto the scene of these glam rockers really do point out to us that the politics didn't work. The politics failed. The liberation movements of the 60s failed. And so this cultural performance in part is a fuck you to the politics that failed us. And we will in fact just perform everything to the height of excess. We will break out of these gender and sexuality roles culturally if we're not going to be able to do so politically.
I do think, though, that part of what glam rock depends upon is a conservative reception against which it can declare itself.
We get through Ziggy Stardust an opportunity to see the moment of that cultural transgression that is accompanying and then coming after a lot of this political transgression. And so politics goes back to status quo and the pendulum shifts to the left a bit, but then sort of comes back to the center.
Nixon now, Nixon now, he's made the difference, he's shown us how.
The glam rock movement really just pushes the pendulum off the anchor altogether.
Large portions of glam rock have to do with people questioning their gender identity through dress and through their performance.
Because what glam rock did that was different from somebody like the New York Dolls, who just kind of dressed in drag and got up on stage and rocked out,
Yeah.
and didn't really answer to the fact that they dressed in drag. Whereas somebody like Bowie was really kind of like, can't you tell that I'm pretty?
Yeah.
Can't you, like, he was kind of flirting with you in his self-presentation.
Men taking on dramatic hairstyles, dramatic makeup styles, lavish costumes, lots of glitter and glam, and pulling this into their personal and performative identities.
Actions on stage. You have a lot of simulated fellatio with men and other men with guitars. And I think all of this is public, forcing public spaces, you know, forcing this into the public view. It's basically putting homosexual behavior right there on stage, on screen for people to see.
As you see that, there's that pull between sort of a traditional masculinity, but maybe a traditional masculinity that wants to play with this queer gender performance, but maintain its masculinity through its sound. But like kind of keeping a real, for me, there isn't a really adequate way to talk about it as a binary. I think it is very much a kind of free-flowing thing.
Yeah.
I think actually, oddly, for women more now, there's a lot more acceptability in terms of sexual fluidity and bisexuality. I think that's still more problematic.